you come into the cafe and you're really there, and the play unfolds around you. And kind of just harkening back to what I was saying earlier about art being a way of understanding the world, including understanding history, and it also can create a lot of empathy because you're really there. You are able to maybe think of yourself more as a historical actor. You're a witness to history, and then it creates like a lot of empathy for the characters, which then hopefully creates
that was Katie
empathy
Conry,
for the trans
the
community
Tenderloin
as well.
Museum's executive director. I'm Jeff, and this is Storied San Francisco, a podcast all about the artists, activists, and small businesses that make this city what it is. This episode picks up where we left off in part 1, with a deep dive into Tenderloin history. That leads Katie to share the story of a Tenderloin Museum-produced play about the Compton's Cafe riots. And that takes us to Aunt Charlie's, the last queer bar left in the neighborhood. We end with the new neon sign located above the corner of Eddy and Leavenworth, just outside the museum. Here's Katie.
We didn't open with having an art gallery,
Okay.
but we kind of created one pretty quickly. It's, I think, a way of connecting with the community. You know, it's having a rotating art gallery when you have a permanent exhibition. It's a way for reason for people to come back.
People in, yeah.
As well. And yeah, I think that we've never, we're at the intersection of art, history, and community, and we've never thought of those things as being different to some degree. You know, I think that art is a really powerful way of understanding the world, and so it's a really powerful way of understanding history. And talking about some of our, the Compton's Cafeteria riot.
Yes.
Yeah.
Let's do it.
So that's a major historical event that we've championed here. So, I mean, that's a classic example of what I'm talking about. But to just back up a bit to
Sure.
give a little bit more context on that.
Sure.
And just to maybe jump back into Tenderloin history. The Tenderloin was effectively shut down by these new laws that they passed, limiting where women could independently go on their own.
So
In
the Moral
1917,
Crusaders won.
briefly.
For a time.
And Tenderloin kind of managed to bounce right back because of Prohibition.
Oh, right.
Because then all nightlife kind of went underground.
Right,
And San
literally.
Francisco was always wet. So the 20s, 30s, 40s is when the Tenderloin is really this glitzy, seedy nightlife capital of the Bay Area.
Okay.
You had bars, restaurants. Sometimes those bars and restaurants also had gambling and brothels. So it's kind of this underground economy and above ground economy working together. There's not really much of a separation between the two. Also in the 40s, San Francisco and the Tenderloin is very much impacted by World War II. And again, that high density of affordable housing. San Francisco is a major port for service people going to the Pacific Theater. And so you had a ton of service people staying in kind of the SROs, particularly there's opportunities for people who from more conservative areas to maybe explore their queerness, and in a time where obviously that was incredibly underground. So that's the beginning of San Francisco in general, even becoming an area known as a gay area.
A Mecca.
The gay Mecca. And the Tenderloin in general was kind of starting to support that community and nightlife that was developing around it.
Yeah. Makes a lot of sense.
Yeah. The Army wasn't huge about it.
Surprise.
Yeah. In some cases, bars would even have lockers where you could change out of your service uniform in case there was a raid.
Oh.
It was less. And some cases, the Army would give these, produce these like sheets that said like, these bars are off limits to go to. So if that's what you're interested though, then that's just a map of places to go.
Thanks. Yes.
So that worked out.
Yeah.
And so then also there was kind of moral reforming that then was happening in that mid-century time as well. And George Mayor Christopher specifically like had a real vendetta against the Tenderloin. His brother got into some legal trouble in the neighborhood related to kind of like nightlife underground activities, and he kind of blamed the neighborhood and thought it was a blight on San Francisco.
Scapegoating.
Yeah, so his he basically like cracked down on gambling effectively enough to that the practice actually ended. And
hypocritically, I'm sure too.
I'm sure.
Yeah.
I mean, he also did some other things to decimate the neighborhood. Like he removed like the cable cars, which were the main public transit. He wanted to he made the streets one way because he wanted to think of the Tenderloin as just an extension of Union Square. So you don't need to stop, just get there as quickly as possible. And like I mentioned, like the connection between the underground and above ground economy. So once that kind of decimated the economy of the Tenderloin, it's basically like the 50s into the 60s.
And that was like the beginning
the first time it's ever been referred to as an economically depressed area.
Okay.
So then...
I was going to say that's the beginning, 50s especially, 40s, 50s, the beginning of car culture. And when they made Gary Boulevard.
Sure, yeah.
And it's like, get what you're talking about, like the one-way streets to get out of and get basically to the freeway.
Yeah.
To get you to the suburbs.
Yeah.
That are still San Francisco.
And there's maybe not as much of a need to like stay at like one of the downtown hotels overnight. Just get to the suburbs.
Yeah. Okay.
And so, yeah, in the 60s is... well, I mean, we all know what happened in San Francisco in the 60s. A lot of people kind of, youths particularly, like rejecting like mainstream values kind of flooded San Francisco. A lot of the ones that were kind of exploring a queer identity ended up in the Tenderloin. So you see a lot of like organizing happening around the churches.
Okay.
Churches were really foundational to the beginning of the modern gay civil rights movement, particularly Glide.
Right.
So Susan Stryker, who's a trans historian we work with a lot, is a real friend of the museum's. She's the one that kind of rediscovered the Compton's cafeteria riot and made the film Screaming Queens.
Oh, okay.
She has described Glide as like the midwife of the modern LGBTQ civil rights movement.
Yeah.
So there's a group called the Vanguard. That was like a kind of a radical queer youth organization that was starting, and this is like years before Stonewall. This is like, before like unofficially the gay civil rights movement even started in like the official record. This is very early 60s.
Okay.
And so we have that kind of organizing happening. And then there's also like a lot of women identifying as trans or like queens at the time that are living in kind of these SRO hotels, particularly like on Turk and Eddy Street. So you see like that community kind of forming, in the city for the first time. And a lot of them, worked as sex workers. There wasn't really like a lot of means for legal employment for the queer community. And a lot of them, frequented Compton's cafeteria as like one of the only places in the city that would actually serve them.
Which is intersection of...
Turk and Taylor. Yeah. So, the Vanguard also frequented this establishment. So you kind of have these kind of like younger rebel rousers and maybe like some of these older trans women sex workers kind of all meeting and talking at Compton's. And then... there's some protesting that's happening over like the way that they're being treated there, that I think was like spearheaded by the Vanguard. And then, 1966, the police did a raid of Compton's, and famously then a trans woman poured a hot cup of coffee in his face. And then the whole diner erupted and fought back against like this police harassment, police brutality, and kicked them out of the restaurant. And it's, I mean, one of the first known militant responses to police harassment in U.S. history by the queer community, and was kind of essentially lost to history. There is a couple of articles about it, but it was buried.
Why do you think that is? Stonewall, or was Stonewall originally? I don't.
Happened at a different time.
Yes.
So I think the movement was even farther along by the time Stonewall happened.
Right.
And there was an effort, I mean, New York is like a media capital of the country. There was an effort kind of right away to memorialize it, where the same thing just didn't happen after Compton's happened.
Right.
Although by all accounts from the interviews Susan Dunn has done about that historic incident, there certainly was a feeling of fighting back and fighting for rights that kind of permeated after the riot.
Right.
But it just was not memorialized in the same way. The same kind of activists involved maybe didn't have the same kind of media savvy.
Right.
Yeah.
I wonder if,
I'm just speculating to some degree. I don't want to officially go on the record about
yeah,
that. But
I'll add one more speculation. Tell me what you think. Is that the Tenderloin, and my understanding of Stonestown is basically the West Village. Very different neighborhoods, even 2 years apart, but different neighborhoods.
Yeah, definitely.
Different cities, you've mentioned, but
the media was used to ignoring, burying things.
That's what I'm getting
at.
Yeah, already. Yeah.
It seems like there was a concerted effort to bury it.
Yeah.
But there is enough evidence, including eyewitness testimony.
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, we showed Screaming Queens, the documentary, our first night our first ever program,
yes.
The first day that we opened. And
it's appropriate.
And Susan Stryker was here, and Tamara Ching, who's interviewed in the documentary, who was a sex worker and trans woman at the time. And so, I mean, it's always been, I think, promoting this historical event is so important in so many ways. It gives trans women, particularly trans women of color, back their rightful place in history as being at the vanguard of the movement.
More than just visibility, it's this is
they led the movement.
Important.
Yeah.
Right.
And I mean, it's also gives San Francisco and the Tenderloin then back its rightful place in history as the beginning of the movement. And I mean, it's one of the major stories that people know about San Francisco and queer civil rights is Harvey Milk and the Castro. This happened a full 10 years before that.
Yeah.
And we screened, so we produced a play about the Compton's cafeteria riots.
Okay, yes.
In 2018, which was really the outgrowth of our programming and all the work we had kind of done to promote this event and work we had done with the trans community.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Where was it staged?
New Village Cafe. So it's immersive theater.
Okay.
So you come into the cafe and you're really there, and the play unfolds around you. And kind of just harkening back to what I was saying earlier about art being a way of understanding the world, including understanding history, and it also can create a lot of empathy because you're really there. You are able to maybe think of yourself more as a historical actor. You're a witness to history, and then it creates a lot of empathy for the characters, which then hopefully creates empathy for the trans community as well.
Right.
And just gives you a real emotional connection to history.
Yeah.
And I mean, the play was wildly successful. It sold out all of its run, and we've been working to bring it back.
Who wrote it?
Donna Persona, Colette Legrand, and Mark Nasser are the writers of the play. Donna and Colette are both trans women who were involved in the Tenderloin in the 60s and went to Compton's.
Okay.
And I introduced them. I had met Mark, who was a bartender in the area and was one of the originators of Tony and Tina's wedding. That was what gave it the immersive bent idea, background. And I introduced them at a program at the Tenderloin Museum when we screened James Hosking's Beautiful by Night, which is about aging drag performers at Aunt Charlie's, which is our bar. Have you been to Aunt Charlie's?
I have. It's been some time. I know a little bit about Aunt Charlie's, but let's hear more.
I mean, it's just an incredible community space. I call it the Tenderloin's living room, and it is the last queer bar in the Tenderloin, which, as we talked about, was like a major queer hub.
Yes.
The first gay neighborhood in San Francisco. It's just a really special space. I mean, it's a real community feel. Everyone who lives and works in the neighborhood kind of passes through there at some point. I mean, they also have incredible drag shows, and we've been partnering with them pretty much since we opened. In 2019, we produced a series of art shows about Aunt Charlie's.
Oh, excellent. Here at the museum?
Yeah,
yes.
Centering queer artists that did portraits of different performers at Aunt Charlie's. We did 4 different art shows, and it's one of my favorite things we've ever done, and an oral histories project as well.
Nice. And you got it in right before the pandemic, it sounds like.
Yeah, we did.
Yeah.
And that was the most fun art openings that we've ever had, because all the performers that were featured in the show came to perform for the opening.
Yes, it wasn't just people playing people, it was the people.
Yeah, the art
it was
left off the wall.
Yes, I bet it got.
And
I bet it
performed
did.
for you.
How long has Aunt Charlie's been there? When did it open? Do you know who opened it? That story?
Yeah, Aunt Charlie's itself is from the 80s,
Okay.
but it's been a queer bar for a lot longer than that. It used to be called the Queen Mary.
Okay.
And Turk Street was filled with gay bars, so it was one of many. And it's kind of like the last survivor.
Yeah.
And an incredibly important anchor for the queer community that's in the neighborhood.
Absolutely.
Our art show series was called Aunt Charlie's San Francisco's Working Class Drag Bar.
Yes, I love it.
Yeah.
So Turk and what is its cross street?
It's very close to Turk and Taylor, which is the site of the Compton's Cafeteria.
Right
yeah,
there.
I mean, if you walk outside, you can see it basically across the street. So then the 3 of them worked for a year, meeting every week to write the script, which is then based on their experiences.
Right.
So we had a plan to produce the play in 2020. So obviously that didn't happen.
Oops.
We were going to produce it in kind of an existing cafe space that wasn't currently being used, and I mean, we've been working since then, basically, to bring it back. Now we're really close to being able to do that.
Excellent.
So it's a really exciting opportunity.
Yeah.
I mean, Mark, Donna, and Colette are still very much involved. Ezra Reeves has joined the team. He's going to direct and is a producer as well. And we leased a space on Larkin Street to produce this play year-round.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Yeah. Fuck,
we're opening a new business, basically.
Well, in line with what you're doing.
Yeah, I mean, the play is incredible.
Yeah.
It's a huge leap of faith in some ways, because it's, releasing a whole new space and basically starting a business. But I mean, it's a leap of faith for an incredible project that we really believe in. And there's more opportunities for vacant storefronts now, and there just wasn't a restaurant that it was possible to produce it in. So we're creating a set of a cafe for you to be able to see the play in a cafe.
It is kind of a lot to ask a restaurant to be can we borrow for unspecified time?
I mean, if it kind of works out if they're closed in the evenings, kind of thing.
Right.
But there just wasn't. Last time we produced it on Polk Street, which is close to the neighborhood, but obviously a different neighborhood. And it was just a huge priority to have it in the actual boundaries of the Tenderloin for this production.
Right.
We want to, promote positive activations in the neighborhood. So,
what are the actual boundaries of the Tenderloin?
Well, you can look up at this map on our ceiling.
Yes, I'll definitely get a photo of that.
The Tenderloin is north of Market Street in definition, up to Geary, over to Mason, over to Polk on either side.
Okay, Mason to Polk, east and west.
Yeah, I mean, this is like the official boundaries. We have another map of it too I can show you, but obviously, like, you know, it's a little bit more fluid than strict boundaries, but these are, and the definition of where the Tenderloin is has changed throughout history too.
Sure.
But this is the generally agreed upon modern definition.
And I do love a good three-dimensional ceiling map.
Thanks. Yeah,
That's excellent.
and it lights up. I mean, I think, yeah, by its very definition, the Tenderloin is north of Market Street and like south of Geary Boulevard.
Right.
I mean, basically.
North and south ends.
And ends like before you get to Union Square.
Right.
Yeah.
We've got a lot of excellent stuff. I do want, if you can, to talk about the new sign.
Yes.
I am in like utter, like I follow SF Neon, and when I saw that they were, first it was for me, I was like, they're doing the Cadillac, and then I was like, wait, there's more to it than that.
Yeah, so we also do a lot of neon restoration work. We're the fiscal sponsors of San Francisco Neon, which basically means that they're like a nonprofit under our umbrella.
Oh.
So, you know, they can apply for like grants and things to produce, like we do a neon symposium every year. I mean, they do the neon symposium. We help, which is like international event with neon enthusiasts. And yeah, we connected about being their fiscal sponsor back in like 2016.
Okay.
And it's just been a really fruitful collaboration. You know, we've collaborated on like art shows, neon walking tours, lots of public programming events. I mean, we think of neon as the intersection of art, history, and safety. You know, there's more neon signs in place in the Tenderloin than any other place in San Francisco. I mean, San Francisco already has a ton of neon signs, but the Tenderloin has the most. And you know, it's historically interesting. It's artistically interesting. It adds street lighting, and it's just kind of a beautiful, popular thing. Like, there's just neon enthusiasts are very passionate people.
Yes.
It's been some of our, it's just a fun way of exploring history. It's been some of our real blockbuster programming. You know, they really come out for things. And then, you know, while they're here, they can learn about other things in Tenderloin history. And so there was a photograph that was found through, like, San Francisco Remembered Facebook group of the Cadillac's like huge neon sign, which our founder, like Randy Shaw, hadn't seen, Kathy Looper hadn't seen. So
this is back from when it was an actual hotel.
Right. So yeah, I guess a little background on the Cadillac that we're in the ground floor of. Kathy and Leroy Looper bought it in 1978, I believe. And at that point it was, you know, kind of a classic, it's like a microcosm of Tenderloin history. In a way, because it kind of was a fancy hotel when it was built. It kind of had become de facto housing, and then had become housing for poor people. Okay. And they bought it, this beautiful but like decaying building from 1908. And they renovated it and didn't like displace a single resident, and turned it into like the first non-profit supportive housing on the West Coast.
Oh, wow.
So then that became like a model that's still practiced in the neighborhood today.
Okay.
You know, if you walk around and see like a lot of neon signs or other signs that say hotel, it's often SRO hotels that is residential housing, often supportive housing.
I'm thinking of that movie that's kind of circulating now, Home is a Hotel, which there are Tenderloin stories in that movie. And
yeah, absolutely. We screened that at the museum recently.
Excellent movie that everyone should try to see.
And Sylvester's a friend of the museum's as well, the artist involved in the movie.
Yeah.
So, yeah, Kathy Looper, even though she had been in the neighborhood since the late 70s, owned the Cadillac since that time still had not seen this
Seen the
photo.
sign.
So this photo looks like it's probably from the 40s.
Okay.
Of this, it was news to everyone, and everyone was really excited about it.
Yeah.
We, based on some information we had received, kind of were under the assumption that it would be, because it's like a recreation of a sign, that it would be under like the vintage sign designation code.
Oh.
But that was not correct.
Okay.
I should also say that so the Tenderloin Museum and SF Neon also do like neon restoration work in the neighborhood.
Okay.
Like we have an initiative with the city to like help restore neon signs in the Tenderloin neighborhood. So it's often just connecting, prioritizing signs for repair and connecting like the business owners with different funding available to them from the city, like through SF Shines, which interestingly enough is like a city beautification. And at one point you could use that money to remove neon signs when they were considered blight, and now it can be used to repair neon signs now that they're considered beautiful again.
Funny thing,
cultural
taste.
attitudes, towards neon has really changed.
Yeah.
And so the idea was to have the original side, one side say Cadillac, the original, and then the other side would say just Tenderloin. So it could be a sign for the entire neighborhood. And we got some funding from a city grant called the Community Challenge Grant, and from Magic Cabinet, a foundation we work with. And we had all our paperwork filled out and ready to go. And then they told us, like, there's no way that this counts as, like, under that ordinance. It's just, there's nothing of the original sign left. And so they were like, talk to your supervisor. And we had been redistricted.
It just changed.
So we reached out to like Dean Preston, and his aide Kyle was extremely helpful in getting a vintage sign ordinance passed for the Tenderloin. So you are now in the Tenderloin Historic Neon Sign District.
Okay.
Where there's different sign laws for specifically neon signs.
Yeah, I want that on a t-shirt.
We have some t-shirts, they don't go into that kind of detail. So this was like it took us like 3 years basically to get this sign installed. It was a very lengthy process, but in doing so, we had lots of meetings with the Tenderloin Central City SRO Collaborative about the neon restoration work. They were super supportive. Like that group and a few other groups had put together like this contact statement about like the Tenderloin's priorities, and they had specifically listed neon. So like the neighborhood really loves it.
Yeah.
Like, we had SRO residents talking about like the renovations that had happened on like the sign in their buildings and how much they loved it, and how it was like they got to see this work of art when they were coming home every day. Yeah. So it got us like, it was good community building
outreach, and that's great.
And the sign lighting ceremony was like a lovely community event.
Yes.
And like the supervisor was here and had great energy, and the sign looks beautiful. Worth it.
Yeah, I'll get some shots up for our listeners. Can we wrap with every season on our podcast we have a theme, and our theme this season is We Are All In It. I just want to know what that means to you. Take your time.
I think we are all in it. Everything we do affects somebody else. And maybe we're more aware of that than we were in the past. But we all belong to a cultural ecosystem. And we are all in this together, and all boats rise together.
That was Katie Conry, Executive Director of the Tenderloin Museum. On the next episode, meet San Francisco born and raised artist Milan Allen. Episode 8 drops next Tuesday, wherever you get podcasts. Music for Storied San Francisco was produced, performed, and curated by Otis McDonald. Aaron Lim of Bitch Talk Podcast is our contributing producer. And the show is produced and hosted by me, Jeff Hunt. Now in our 6th season, we have more than 200 episodes available on our website, storiedsf.com, or wherever you listen to podcasts. If you're able to, please rate and review the show, and drop us a line at storiedsf@gmail.com. Thanks for listening. Keep rejecting those silly doom loop narratives about our city. Stay wacky, weird, healthy, and creative. And we'll see you next time on Storied San Francisco. We acknowledge and respect the first humans of the unceded land we call San Francisco, the Ramaytush Ohlone. We condemn the genocide of these and other tribes across the Western Hemisphere. We honor their legacy and history, and we support rematriation and sovereignty efforts.
This podcast is a proud member of the BFF.FM podcast network. Learn more at podcast.bff.fm.
BFF.FM, best frequencies forever.